Bueno, hola, soc la Montserrat i presento jo l'acte avui. Bon dia. Avui estic molt content de tenir la Denise i la Kathleen Humberstone en aquestes jornades perquè es faci una conferència al meu costat, les dues. La Kathleen té 18 anys i va fer una xerrada a Nacions Unides el 20 de març per demanar la fi de la discriminació cap a les persones amb la síndrome de Down i reclamar la igualtat. La Denise, la seva mare, també treballa pels drets de les persones amb síndrome de Down, va fundar i dirigir el grup de suport tot pel síndrome de Down a l'Aràbia Saudita. M'he llegit l'discurs que la Kathleen va fer a Nacions Unides. M'ha agradat molt el que diu ella. Em sembla molt bé que vulgui viure independent, com jo, també visc independent. Els primers dies em va costar viure independent, però després ja va anar tot bé amb el suport que havia pres amb la meva mare a fer les coses de casa. I he pogut viure independent. Abans d'això, tenir una feina digna, un sou digne i viure independent. Jo també tinc una feina. Penso que és important que les persones amb síndrome de Down puguem expressar-nos com fa la Kathleen. Jo, amb l'ajuda de l'Assemblea de Drets Humans, de la que formo part, em vaig presentar a les eleccions de l'Institut Municipal de Persones amb Discapacitat i de l'Ajuntament de Barcelona al juliol de l'any passat. I vaig guanyar. Ara soc representant totes les persones amb discapacitat intel·lectual. Podem fer les propostes que siguin més importants per ells. I ara, al meu costat, tinc la Kathleen i a l'altre costat tinc la mare, que és la Denise. I passo palabra a la Kathleen.
Hello, Ola. I am so happy. Thank you for having me. I love Spain. I love Barcelona. My brother and my sister are very jealous. Nobody invites them because they have only 46 chromosomes. But I travel a lot because I have 47 chromosomes. I was in Paris for a photo shoot last year. I was in London for another photo shoot. It's this year. I was at the United Nations in Geneva in March. Last month, I got a model company to represent me. It's called Zobidi. I had to do a photo shoot for them. It was great fun. And I'm here today to talk to you about my life. Yes, I have that syndrome. and many other qualities. I am funny, cheeky, bossy, and chatbox, and a diva. I can't help it. I am in love with my life and with my boyfriend Jack Saunders. My boyfriend. I speak English and French because my father, Andrew, is British. I love my baby so much. And my mother, Denise, is French. I don't speak Spanish yet. So I have a sister, Jessica. She is beautiful. And she's best sister ever. And she is a good cook. I have a brother, Andy. He is 14, very handsome. So like my daddy. And the best brother ever. He plays rugby and cricket. And he played PS4. They don't care about Down syndrome because they love me most of the time. And I love them most of the time. Teenagers, you know what I mean? Thank goodness, I have 2 dogs, Max and Gecko. They don't know I have Down syndrome. I was born in Saudi Arabia. It's not funny. I was born in Saudi Arabia. And do you know why? Really, really lucky. Because my parents didn't know I had Down syndrome. I was a big surprise. And yes, they were sad. Because they worried about me. But they didn't care about Down syndrome. But they loved me. I went to mainstream school in Jeddah for 2 years, in Dubai for 4 years, and India for 3 months. In India, or in China for 1 year, and in 3 years in England. When I want to do a great school for special needs for 5 years. Now I am in a special sixth form college, and it's my last year. Then I hope to go to a great special academy for 3 years. I have a lot of dreams, like all of you. After college, I want to try to live independently. I want to get married, have a job, be a model and do a catwalk, travel and go on holiday. I love to sing. I know I'm so talented, so I know. I love to dance. I love to exercise. I love to love. I have Down syndrome. Yes, so what? I am a good person. I am not scary. All my friends with Down syndrome are nice people. They are not scary. So why? Let's ask them why. Why people don't want babies with Down syndrome? What is wrong? What is wrong with Down syndrome? So, my mom, Denise, my mom say just because people are afraid of Down syndrome. I don't get it. Afraid of what? You saw all the pictures. Can you see that? My family and I suffer because I have Down syndrome. No, they do suffer. Then they hear people like me are not wanted. I suffer every time I hear people like me are not wanted. My friends suffer every time they hear people like us are not wanted. And that is not cool. That's not right. It is not right. We are not worth living, just like you. My name is Kathleen Humberstone. I love my life. Thank you so much. Thank you, and yes. And the last one, I will give you what my mom Denise Humberstone. Thank you so much.
I'm going to try not to be emotional. It's going to be hard. Is it boasting to say that I am so proud of my daughter? Especially when I think back of the day she was born. I knew the diagnosis as soon as I looked at her, and it just didn't matter. She was mine, and I was going to be the best mother for her. Because isn't it our role, our duty as parents to love unconditionally and to make sure that we bring out the full potential of our children, whatever that may be. And I have to tell you that I failed miserably on the very first day, because I was already thinking of all the things I thought she would never be able to do. Like read and write, speak French, go to mainstream school, make friends. And I would whisper in her ears on that very first day, it doesn't matter, don't you worry, we'll still love you just as much. And you know what, we would have, but clearly she had other plans. But it just goes to show that a mother's love is not built upon her child's potential, achievements, and abilities, or lack of. It just is. And it makes you climb mountains if and when you have to. Even if, when you look back, they were just molehills. Before I start, I would just like to clarify that I don't belong nor represent any organization, which I suppose gives me the freedom to express my own uncensored and probably too many unpopular, religion-free views. I certainly don't have any black and white answers. I am definitely not an academic. My views have been forged over the past 2 decades, from personal experience, yes, but mostly from observing and conversing with parents of a child with a disability, mostly Down syndrome, but not exclusively. Parents from different nationalities, different cultures, different countries, different political views, and at very different stages of their parenthood, which is important. Also, I would like to stress that I am not against any medical and scientific progress and research. What I am against is when their outcomes are subsequently used and abused to exploit the fears of disability and the dreams of perfection. I am not pro-life. I am, however, very much pro-choice. As long as balanced and unbiased information is given to women parents who have just received a positive diagnosis, so they can make an informed decision. And at the moment, we are quite far from it. So now that we are, I hope, crystal clear, I would like to thank you for having us. We feel very privileged to take part in this amazing conference. You've had incredible input from the most wonderful speakers over the past 2 days, spanning all the life stages of individuals with Down syndrome, broaching their health, their education, and their potential opportunities in the future. I'm in awe of everything the Foundation has achieved over the past 33 years. And yet, thanks to the mind-blowing progress of medicine, it looks like you're all going to be a lot less busy in the not-so-distant future. As babies born with Down syndrome, and soon with any other congenital disability, are set to become a rarity and even a thing of the past, like it was all a really bad dream. Not everywhere, mind you. Only in countries where governments have the means to offer prenatal testing. Governments which already have all the infrastructures in place, all the painstakingly acquired knowledge to bring out the full potential of our people, and by lessening the impact of their disability. Governments which already have what we would like to believe, a positive mindset towards disability through fought-for laws and human rights. Ironically, one of about 700 babies will still be born with Down syndrome in the rest of the world. In countries where governments are too poor to afford prenatal tests for every pregnant woman, too poor to afford postnatal care for every baby born with a disability. In countries where governments are too poor to have any infrastructure to cater for their citizens with any disability. Governments too poor to implement the knowledge that the richer philanthropic countries would happily and freely pass on. And countries where the display of disability left to its own device will always be a very convenient reminder to richer countries that they sure did the right thing. I don't believe it's a sketchy path I'm describing you. It's a very clear one, according to the current and rising selective termination rate in many countries. It's about 90% in the UK, a bit less in the USA, and here in Spain, for now, more in Iceland and Denmark, where we know they've almost achieved their goal to be Down syndrome-free countries. However, quite a few of our young people and their relatives are trying their very best to alter the course of that path, so that they're given the recognition that their genetic makeup should not be a reason for termination, should not be ground for eradication. But the time span keeps shrinking, and the deadline, pun intended, keeps being brought forward because of scientific and medical progress. So what can be done? It's not like women can be forced into carrying on with a pregnancy they don't want. Thankfully, hopefully. It's not like fetuses will ever have a right to personal data protection. On the contrary, it seems they now have a duty of full personal data release without having to ever sign a consent form. So all we can do to alter that gloomy path is raise awareness and try and understand the real work behind the alarming and shocking figures of selective termination rates. As Kathleen told you, she's now 18, and I've always told her that she has Down syndrome from the age of about 2.5, following the advice of a speech and language therapist. And as she grew up, she started asking me questions, ranging from, what is Down syndrome? Why do I have Down syndrome? Do I still have Down syndrome? And more recently, I don't want to have Down syndrome anymore. I hope we've always managed to navigate between being sensitive and yet honest, and still give her answers that she can understand. But basically, she's always come away reassured that it's okay to have Down syndrome. It's just different, and we all have something to bring to this world. But then something happened. The NIPT came out, the non-invasive prenatal test. It has a really nice ring to it, doesn't it? The semantics used seem very safe, positive, reassuring. And at first, it just made me sad. And I just bowed down I just put my head in the sand and bowed to what has been drummed into us for quite a while now. It's all about choice, the magic word. It keeps everybody at bay. Another way of saying, don't interfere. It's not debatable. End of. Until. One day earlier this year, Kathleen was ecstatic because she had picked up on the word Down syndrome on the radio, and she thought that they were celebrating her condition, except that they were hailing the NIPT as the long-awaited-for panacea to Down syndrome. And they were expecting everybody else to rejoice with them that soon there would be no more people like Kathleen in our world. And the majority phoning into that show reflected that view. And that dichotomy slapped me in the face. The dichotomy of what Kathleen had understood and what they had made. And I panicked. How long do I have until she picks up on what they really meant? And I guess that was my tipping point. I changed gear. And from a regular mum, I turned into a tiger mum. How dare they? How dare they force me into having to try and explain to my wonderful child that a most extraordinary medical breakthrough will be used mostly to detect and eliminate fetuses with her condition as early as possible, because the earlier, the less controversy. And hopefully, if the marketing strategies are run successfully, governments would be eager to buy these tests, and they won't have to deal with what they view as a problem and a drain on their resources. They will simply eliminate the problem at its source. The NIPT is, after all, a market that will reach $2.8 billion. $2.8 billion by 2021. And I quote, "Untapped emerging markets are expected to offer potential growth opportunities to players operating in the NIPT market during the forecast period." In other words, clusters of cells with Down syndrome are worth a fortune. Individuals with Down syndrome cost a fortune. It's a no-brainer. How dare they, when I spent the past 18 years convincing her that it's okay to have her condition? How dare they, when they have spent, the past 40 years, slowly but surely building them up to believe that it's okay to be disabled? How dare they force me into having that now unavoidable conversation? I did ask around for some advice, but really it's pretty much uncharted territory. It's not like you can go on Google and type in, "How do you explain to your child without damaging her that the world doesn't want people like her?" So I gave it my best shot. And the outcome I got away with was, because they don't know much about Down syndrome, Kathleen. And ignorance or distorted reality is a huge contributing factor to high selective termination rates, but I don't believe it's the only one. And I did a lot of soul searching and internet searching. Why? What is it? And I apologize if it appears oversimplified, but it's only a summary so that it would fit into the allocated time today. So to me, there are 4 main contributing factors, and all 4 feed off each other. So first you've got the perception of what Down syndrome is, based on outdated information that stick to our collective memory like super glue, and the fears rising from this. 2, you've got the medical and healthcare professionals, their narratives and the fears rising from this. 3, you've got the government and their standpoint regarding screening, and particularly the NIPT, and the fears rising from this. And 4, you've got being pregnant, with hormones all over the place, and being exposed to all sorts of tests designed to focus solely on the negatives of your offspring. Can you see how these 4 can just feed off each other? So let's have a look at the first one. It would appear that our collective memory of people with Down syndrome, that painting depicting them when they had no access to early intervention, no medical care, no loving family, when it was all doom and gloom. Well, that painting has never been updated with today's bright picture, filled with hope, love, inclusion, education, and great achievements. And I paint a very rosy picture here on purpose. I deliberately decided to almost ignore the minority of our children who have more complex needs. Not because they don't deserve to be mentioned, but for the purpose of this exercise, for argument's sake. Because very often, whenever we try to raise awareness and showcase, because that's what we have to do when we raise awareness, we have to showcase our children, like I did today with Kathleen. So when we showcase our children, the counter-argument is that, yes, but they are not all like that. End of discussion, doors closed. First of all, a parent's love for their child, a family's happiness, is not inversely proportionate to a child's degree of cognitive impairment. 2, what are we supposed to believe? That there are 9 out of 10 selective terminations because they might have complex needs? The majority of patients in hospitals worldwide, 46 chromosomes, not 47. The majority of patients in mental institutions, 46 chromosomes, not 47. The totality of criminals, alcoholics, drug addicts, pedophiles, money launderers, crooks, serial killers, terrorists, 46 chromosomes, not 47. And you want to talk to me about complex needs? Back to the painting. It feels like there's been a glitch in our collective memory. The debate has never been downloaded, and we need to understand why. So in the past, we as a population were convinced by society that the right thing to do was to institutionalize. For decades, under the pseudo-choice, it's up to you. What would you rather do? Send it to an institution or ruin your marriage, your life, your children's lives? Men were the ultimate decision makers back then, legally and socially. And our main source of information was our family doctor. Today, we as a population are being subtly, or not so subtly, led to believe by society that the right thing to do is to have a selective termination. Under the pseudo-choice, it's up to you. What would you rather do? Have an early and safe termination, or risk your marriage, your happiness, and your family's happiness? Women are now the ultimate decision makers, socially and legally. And our main source of information is the internet, social media, and our medical practitioners. We've witnessed huge progress in the medical field, the NIPT, huge change in the legal system and the tenets of bioethics. Abortion is now legal and socially acceptable. Huge progress in society, women's rights to vote, rights for people with disabilities, the advent and revolution of the internet and social media. And yet, incredibly or predictably, the end results are the same. The script, the narrative for our main character, or it with Down syndrome, hasn't changed. It's just been shifted. It's just that instead of 9 out of 10 babies sent to institutions, there are now 9 out of 10 selective terminations on the ground of Down syndrome. Instead of having a baby to deal with, we now only have a clutter of cells to deal with. And the course of action differs dramatically depending on the locations of that main character, in utero or ex utero. And the safe zone, danger zone of the entity with Down syndrome have been subjected to a straight swap. Bear with me. The safe zone used to be in utero for 9 months. The safe zone is now ex utero. No more institutions, access to medical care, to education, inclusion into society, and in most cases to a loving family. The danger zone was ex utero, with the near certainty of a short and miserable life in an institution. The danger zone is now in utero, with a high threat of destruction within the first 10 weeks of gestation, and even up to the point of birth, because it is still considered as a severe disability. Not sure if it is in Spain, but in France and the UK, it certainly is. It would appear that the main rationale behind the past mercy institutionalizations and the current mercy selective terminations across cultures is that Down syndrome has been systematically synonymous with punishment, burden, suffering, ridicule, shame, embarrassment, a threat to your marriage and a threat to your existing or potential other children's happiness. I'm sure you could add to the list. But in other words, they are dehumanized, and that's when fears set in. Except that back then, those fears existed in spite of the fact that there were no studies conducted to support such claims. Except that today, those irrational fears persist in spite of the fact that there are studies conducted to debunk such claims. And for some reason, they are not reaching our psyche. Except that today, those fears persist in spite of the fact that we have the power of social media, with countless stories that get shared all over the world within our Down syndrome community. And every now and then, a few of those may reach the digital screens of the population at large, the outsiders, I call them. And they'll go, oh, how sweet, how wonderful. That's it. So what are these fears? There's the fear of a life of suffering, which was most probably true. Who wouldn't suffer without love, without medical care, without purpose, without validation? We now know that the only time they really do suffer is when they are poorly, and every time they hear people like them are not wanted. Nearly 100% of them are happy with their life, thank you very much, and the way they look. I don't think we're anywhere near that for us people who have 46 chromosomes. The problem is who believes that, and who will read those studies. Unless you're very active in the Down syndrome community and don't need to read these studies because you already know all about it. There's the fear of having a child for life and the lifelong burden for the siblings. For the 1 out of 10 who wasn't sent to an institution, that was probably the case. But nowadays there are infrastructures in place such as assisted living for those who are able to live independently, semi-independently, or even for those who have more complex needs. And surprise, surprise, most siblings want to play an active role for their sister, brother, relative life after their parents' death. But again, unless you are in the Down syndrome community, you are not aware of such infrastructure. You've got the fear also that only exceptional people can be parents to a child with special needs. That's one of my favorites. Nonsense. I don't think many of us jumped up out of our seats to shout, yes please, I've always wanted to be the mother of a child with special needs. I just know how to be that parent. You just step up to the plate of parenthood. You don't step down that plate or go hide under it. There is no fit-for-all parent template because every child is special, every child is different. And you just naturally morph into the kind of parents your child needs, regardless whether that child has special needs or not. It's irrelevant. And it's actually that simple. The problem is, you know what I mean. Nobody else does. There's also the fear of short life expectancy. Well, they did have a short life expectancy. They didn't have access to medical care. Fast forward to today, now that they've won the right to have access to medical care, most of them have a long and healthy life. They're certainly no less healthy than those of us who have 46 chromosomes. The problem is, who is aware of that fact? Unless you are in the Down syndrome community. And that's the big one. The fear that it will greatly reduce your rightful share of the happiness cake, and that the filling will be a lifelong misery. In other words, we can't cope with children unless they're perfect. And by the way, I use the word perfect in the medical sense. To me, all of my 3 children are perfect. So what? We can't cope with children unless they're perfect. A marriage partnership won't last unless our children are perfect. Siblings will be okay only as long as they are all perfect. If you think your marriage partnership won't last because our children are not perfect, you may be right. Because our children are very good at highlighting cracks, but they don't create them. So if you worry your relationship won't stand challenges, maybe you should worry about your relationship. But I will state the not so obvious. Divorce rates are lower in families who have a child with Down syndrome than those who don't. And next time your doctor tells you, think of your marriage, tell him or her that divorce rates are much higher amongst the medical professionals than amongst families with a child with Down syndrome. If you're worried about the existing siblings or the future ones, know that they actually develop into adults with greater compassion than adults who didn't have a sibling with Down syndrome. And it may come as a surprise, but most families with a child with Down syndrome are very happy. And most parents say they wouldn't change a thing about their child with Down syndrome, and all learn so much from that child. Look around you. Are families who don't have a child with Down syndrome happier than us? No. The problem is, unless you are in the Down syndrome community, you would never actively research that kind of information. You would never know. And then there's a new fear, which is the product of all the other fears. There's a fear of not being able to go back to work, ever. And yet most of the mums of a child with Down syndrome that I know, and I know quite a few, are working mums, and some are single parents. I'm in the minority, but who is aware of that? You could again add to that list of fears, but you can already see why they still have a long way to go before they are alleviated. You can already see why they spring to the forefront of our memory when suddenly confronted to the diagnosis. And you can already see why it's going to take a long time to change that painting on the wall, never mind the writing. Because the update I was telling you about is not an automatic update. You have to go and look for it. And why would you unless you have to? You don't say, I'm bored today, I'm going to search the internet and see what's up with Down syndrome. When there is a post on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, say about Prader-Willi syndrome or Williams syndrome, what do most people do? Scroll down, yeah? And if you are not involved with Down syndrome, for whatever reason, you would scroll down too when it's about Down syndrome. Actually, you wouldn't be here today, and neither would I. But those who don't scroll down say we are in denial, that we only share the good bits. You can see why I didn't bother mention all the studies conducted by brilliant individuals with great credentials from great universities and hospitals that debunk all these fears. Most of them, by the way, led by the wonderful Dr. Brian Skotko from the Massachusetts General Hospital. Thank God for the Americans, the only ones to get the funding for this type of studies. But I do have all the links for those who are interested, by the way. It doesn't matter that all our babies who manage to slip through the many nets of screening and diagnostics tests prove every single one of their parents' fears wrong. Nobody wants to hear it. Which brings me to my second contributing factor. By the time of the prenatal diagnosis, the only people we've been dealing with, really, are you, the medical and the healthcare professionals. And that's when I cast the first stone at you. But if I can put it this way, it's a stone wrapped with love. Because more than likely, you never went to school where a classmate had Down syndrome. More than likely, your professors at university didn't have much to say about Down syndrome that was positive, and whatever it was purely medical. And actually, just 2 weeks ago, on a BBC Radio 4 interview, Carrie Stephenson, one of the world's leading geneticists, said that when he was at medical university, the goal was to one day be able to screen for Down syndrome in order to eradicate it from Iceland. And it's pretty much job done today. More than likely, you will only ever be involved with people with Down syndrome and their parents when there is a crisis, namely at the point of diagnosis, prenatal or postnatal, when most parents are devastated. And you won't get to see them 2 months or 2 years down the line and see the complete turnaround of these parents and how grateful they are to have their little ones. And some of you will only see them when there is a medical problem. And parents are understandably totally stressed out. Healthcare professionals, you will see parents at the point of therapy when parents are stressed out because they have to juggle really busy timetables. And all of that contributes to shape and comfort your negative perception of what it's like to have a child with Down syndrome. When would you ever get a chance to interact with a family who has a child with Down syndrome and witness that actually, day to day, they're pretty much like any other family? You will never get to witness, and that's a blessing, the daily and genuine, "You're so beautiful, Nanny," with my makeup running down and my hair sticking out first thing in the morning. You will never get to hear the genuine 50 times a day, "I love you, Daddy." You will never get to experience the tight hug full of love that we get 100 times a day, as if forever grateful to be just alive and content. So you are unwillingly, and to some degree unknowingly, kind of stuck into a time loop, a vicious circle. And your scope of perception is seen through, no offense, tunnel vision. Due to time constraints, you only work, 10 to 15 hours a day and dealing with many more diagnoses than just Down syndrome, and legal constraints, because you may run the risk of a lawsuit if you don't give the worst case scenario. And so again, at the time of pregnancy confirmation, the first time you are meeting with parents-to-be, and it's straight away time to have the NIPT talk or the screening talk. Not so much to check that everything is okay with their child-to-be, but rather that there's nothing wrong with it. And then you see them again at the time of positive results, prenatal or postnatal. And although you're supposed to be as neutral as possible, you might subconsciously relay the negative bits of what you think life with a child with Down syndrome is. Through your facial expression, your body language, the tone of your voice, the terminology you use. Don't underestimate those. You know that patients always try to read their doctors, to read between the lines. And of course, you will have to run through the list of medical problems that their child might have or develop later. That was the love. Now here's the stone. Because prenatal screening tests and diagnostic tests have become so routine and have Down syndrome as their primary target, I would hope that you are prepared by providing parents-to-be documentation with updated information about Down syndrome, suggestions of local Down syndrome support groups, suggestions of support websites, and not automatically assume parents will want to be rushed into a selective termination, as many are. Which brings me to the third contributing factor, and the second stone I'm going to throw, with a bit less love than the first one. The governments. They've been fantastic at providing more and more rights to our children, but at the same time they are really pushing for prenatal tests under the pretense that it's a woman's right to know and a woman's right to choose, but not providing them with balanced information, and therefore potentially influencing her decision-making process towards selective termination. I don't know if you've ever heard of a state-funded healthcare system anywhere in the world, which I believe most are in deficit, that will spend, and I would rather use the word invest, millions of whatever their currency is, in tests that will allow the luxury of knowledge for pregnant women to just know and prepare for the outcome. Have you? Me neither. Why on earth would they spend millions they don't really have on providing free screening tests if it didn't have a return on investment? And that return on investment is to get as near as possible to 100% selective termination rate, which is millions for each country saved in healthcare by not having to provide the support that our children would have otherwise needed throughout their lives. It's also money saved on less time-consuming, invasive, risky, and costly diagnostic tests. In the Netherlands, one of their national newspapers recently published an article on how much Down syndrome is costing society, taxpayers. Why? In France, the video, Dear Future Mum, Cara Mama. It's a video featuring young adults with Down syndrome from different countries talking to a fictitious woman pregnant with a baby with Down syndrome. And all these young adults talk to her and reassure her, tell her what her baby will be able to do later in life. Well, that video in France was banned from being aired on television on the ground that it could disturb the conscience of women who, in accordance with the law, have made personal life choices. How does that even make sense? Did they look too happy and able and made these women feel guilty? What does it say to all the concerned individuals that are already amongst us? And those who will accidentally make it into this world? Well, they have to make sure not to look too happy, not to do too well in life. So these women's consciences are not disturbed. What does it say to us parents? Should we all look terribly depressed and unhappy in case we disturb a conscience? What is the agenda? And that's when I bring in the fourth contributing factor, the pregnant woman, the pregnant parents. We've all heard the phrase, a mother's love is unconditional. And when used, that phrase always has the same very positive tone to it. Unconditional love means you love your child no matter what, which actually means in spite of the challenging bits, rather than thanks to the rewarding bits. What is happening today is that parents-to-be are subliminally conditioned to expect that it doesn't have to be that way. Your love won't have to be tested by and subjected to the challenging bits anymore. Society is slowly but surely teaching us to love unconditionally, yes, but only once that clutter of cells has proved that it won't have built-in challenging bits. We now have the opportunity, or the curse, or the illusion, to produce designer babies. We now have the opportunity, or the curse, or the illusion to be designer parents. A pregnant woman has got all sorts going on in her body. She's naturally anxious in that state. And she's now put on an accepted as routine conveyor belt of all sorts of tests at each doctor's appointment. And her brain keeps being fed with words like disorders, anomalies, test, prenatal, screening, risk, diagnostic, learning disabilities, and so on and so forth. Screening tests are sold to pregnant women as a tool for a prepared, confirmed, informed pregnancy. Their words, not mine. That's how the NIPT is sold. Which means that if you don't take the NIPT, you may not be as well prepared, as well informed. Screening tests are sold to pregnant women as a simple blood test, peace of mind. Every mum deserves to know about her baby. Not only is it all very enticing and seemingly innocent, but women are almost made to feel guilty and irresponsible with that kind of wording if they refuse to take those tests. But then suddenly, they are faced with a positive result. And all the alarm bells ring all at once. All 4 contributing factors kick in, full force. And that woman is asked to make a life-changing decision without much time to think about it. And chances are she won't have time to download the full update before she runs out of time to make that decision. And again, the earlier the test, so the NIPT is now, you can have it between 8 to 10 weeks. So the earlier the test, the less time the mother has to bond with her offspring in case of a positive diagnosis, and the better the chance of termination. And she doesn't hear those words just from her doctor, but also from her family, her friends. Did you have the test? And sometimes from her partner, who is not connected to the offspring in the same way a woman is, obviously, and who may be therefore more inclined to offer a pragmatic reasoning, again, increasing the chance of termination. She'll be told you can think about it, but a termination could be arranged within the next 48 hours, even 24. But if she wants to think about it, she is rarely given an alternative. Although it's all about choice, it seems to me that everything is to be geared up towards what is perceived as the right decision. Because when people ask, what do you want, a boy or a girl? We usually say, I don't mind, as long as it's healthy. What we really mean is, I don't mind, as long as it's disability-free, especially cognitive disability-free. I did tell you in the beginning that I didn't have answers, and sometimes it really does look like a big plate of spaghetti. And I'm not here to judge the 9 out of 10 parents who choose a selective termination. I'm sure they're all really nice people. But I'm trying to understand it because I don't believe for 1 second that all 9 know about the above 4 contributing factors. A mum whose daughter with Down syndrome slipped through all the prenatal tests, she's now 2, and has proved every single one of her parents' fears wrong. That mum recently told me, if someone like me, caring, intelligent, educated, could have done the unthinkable, what hope do we have? It seems that right and wrong keep swapping places depending on where you are, spiritually, geographically, culturally, morally, legally, medically, scientifically, and historically. And those are quite often either out of sync with one another or at loggerheads. And my hope is that this generation, and the ones busy growing up now, are playing the role in demonstrating to those who will soon be in childbearing age that Down syndrome is actually nowhere near as bad as some entities want us to believe. That there's actually a lot more to rejoice over than to fear and worry about. And those future parents who will be confronted to all sorts of increasingly accurate and increasingly targeting prenatal tests may be the ones thanks to whom selective termination rates will start reflecting a more balanced perspective. That was my hope. My worry is scientific progress has always been a precursor of a shift in the moral fabric of society. and sometimes it exposes its true colors. And I wonder and fear that the NIPT has revealed the true views society holds towards disability, views that are legally protected and socially accepted. I wonder and fear that the NIPT exposes the arrogance of the typical population to believe that they have the monopoly to establish the rules of what is and what is not worth living. And I said what is and what is not, instead of who is and who is not, because clusters of cells are not recognized as persons. The truth of the matter is, we are not afraid of Down syndrome per se. We are afraid of what is different. We are afraid of cognitive disability. We are afraid of anything that is not sound-minded or able-bodied. There you have it, in full bloom. The conceitedness of the neurotypical, chromosome-typical, sexual orientation-typical, able-bodied population. We actually think we are the only ones who can enjoy life to the full. And we are right. People who are different will find it very difficult to enjoy life to the full without the help of the able-minded, able-bodied people, our help. So they are held hostage to our goodwill. But it would appear that the typical population is not ready to help anymore, and they take comfort in believing that they are being merciful in preventing people who will be different from being born, thus allowing themselves to live fully, unburdened, or so they think. Forgetting, no doubt, that if the units of measurements for life worthiness were empathy, resilience, and aptitude to happiness, our children would be on top of that list, not at the bottom as they are now. As a conclusion, wouldn't it be awesome if by the time women are pregnant, the update had taken place, the narrative of the medical professionals wasn't so biased anymore, the government stopped trying to carbon copy themselves on business models, then instead of having 4 contributing factors, we'd only have 1, a real choice, and a much lower selective termination rate as a result. But in the meantime, to all the shareholders in the manufacturing companies of prenatal tests, I would like to invite you to get up from behind your labs and profit margin calculations. To all the top decision makers in our government, I would like to invite you to get up from behind your desks. To all the haters and the trolls, I would like to invite you to get up from behind the anonymity of your high-speed and Vaseline-covered keyboards and come and meet our people and tell them to their face, what crime are they committing that you keep targeting their condition? And tell them to their face, and these are the keywords, to their face, why you believe the world would be a better place without them in it. And I will leave you with a little poem that I wrote for Kathleen and all the people like her. And I had it translated into Spanish, so forgive me for my pronunciation, okay? Let me have a drink first. Lo siento si opinas que mi apariencia es una monstruosidad. Desafortunadamente, no se puede hacer nada. Por cierto, en mi opinión, tú eres una belleza. Lo siento si te doy dolor de oídos a causa de la manera en que hablo. Si supieras el esfuerzo que hago, hay tanto que te quisiera decir, aparte de que te quiero. Lo siento si te doy dolor de cabeza a causa de la manera en que pienso. Solo muéstrame el camino y yo te mostraré a ti. Te mostraré cómo querer hasta cuando no se merece realmente. Te mostraré cómo reír, incluso cuando no hay mucho de qué reírse. Te mostraré cómo perdonar, incluso cuando hay tanto por qué estar enojado. Te mostraré cómo coquetear y cómo bailar, como si no hubiera un mañana. Te mostraré cómo dar los mejores abrazos. Te mostraré cómo ser ciego a la edad, la discapacidad y el color de piel de las personas. Y te mostraré cuánto es fácil hacer que la gente se sienta mejor. ¿Esto no vale la pena? ¿Esto no vale todo? Lo siento que tú me rompes el corazón porque crees que no valgo nada. Sí que tengo valor, soy digna de tanto valor. Y ya no vaya a decir más, lo siento, fuera de mi camino, aquí vengo. Thank you very much, gracias.
Moltes gràcies, perquè aquí, com la van llegir, com la Catherine, vale. Tota la fundació, com la directora i la gent que és a fora, la Gemma i la Reyes. I no per acabar aquestes jornades.
In Spain, in Barcelona, and it's about my life, about my first day college, sixth form, and I'm so glad to be with my family, my friends. I love anything. It's my dream, who I am. I love singing. I love being on stage, and I love anything. So, thank you, Mum. I love you. Thank you. Bye. Gracias.
Si em permeteu, dono les gràcies a l'organització perquè ara em toca tancar a mi les jornades després d'aquest testimoniatge, o sigui que qualsevol cosa que digui és simplement ridícula, no? Ho farem rapidet, perquè ja és tard, perquè són 2:45. Jo és la primera vegada que vinc a aquestes jornades, i per tant, com vinc de fora, m'és fàcil, atès la meva experiència en altres àmbits, posar-li una nota a les jornades, i la nota és simplement excel·lent. Portem 2 dies en unes jornades en les quals hem fet un petit viatge, és a dir, les jornades són excel·lents per 3 coses fonamentalment. Una, pels continguts, i aleshores en aquests continguts, en aquest parell de dies que hem estat aquí, doncs si m'ho permeteu, hem fet un petit viatge per tots els serveis de la Fundació, s'han explicat experiències des de l'àmbit mèdic fins a l'àmbit social, passant per diferents itineraris dins de la Fundació. Després, també hem tingut testimoniatges que ens han posat i ens han ubicat al món de la discapacitat i al món de l'accessibilitat en el món. Avui mateix també hem fet un petit viatge per un univers de les emocions. I finalment hi ha hagut testimonis que són simplement impactants. Amb la qual cosa, el contingut de les jornades només el podem qualificar d'excel·lent. Després, perquè hi hagi èxit amb les jornades, hi ha d'haver una organització que molts cops no es veu, però que sense ella això no seria possible. I per tant, jo us demanaria que féssiu un aplaudiment a la Júlia, a l'Ella, a la Joana, a la Gemma que està fora. I finalment, i ara sí per acabar, és a dir, el tercer component d'èxit d'unes jornades és el lideratge. I en aquest sentit, Estem tots d'acord que la jefa està molt implicada i, per tant, li donem un aplaudiment a la Cati i així finalitzem les jornades com ha de ser.